Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Larson. Thanks for joining me in another episode of Keep It Real. So there's a condition that if you haven't heard of it yet, you will soon, because it's really rapidly increasing. It's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is very tightly linked to at least 3 other major health conditions that are really plaguing our culture in general. And that's liver disease and diabetes and cardiovascular disease. These are some of the top killers in the US and beyond. And so it's important to understand this condition because it's very significantly linked to these other conditions and is part of the overall sort of physiopathology of how these conditions manifest in the first place. And so unfortunately there wasn't a lot of research, and still not a whole lot of research, about what causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and so therefore, you know, what can we do about it? But as laboratory science has gotten more sophisticated, they're really good at measuring it and really good at diagnosing it, but still not a lot of intervention about, you know, the therapeutics of what to do about it. And so there's an interesting study that was done that evaluated something in the diet. And so let's just take a step back. All those things that we just talked about totally sound like this is something that happens with adults, which it does. It's very common in adults. But now that there's been certain, mostly dietary changes, this is a very common condition now, unfortunately, in adolescents, and it's increasing significantly. And so a collaboration study was done between Emory University School of Medicine and University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, and they collaborated on evaluating 40 adolescent boys. So they just basically cut the subjects in half, or cut the group in half. 20 followed the intervention, and then 20 just followed just their normal diet. And so here's all they did is they were supplied certain education and certain resources to decrease their sugar. Think of like just typical table sugar, sucrose, their glucose, and their fructose. So 3 main added sugars that this age group and lots of other age groups receive too much of. And they wanted those types of sugars to equal less than 3% of their total calories. That was the research goal for them to follow, at least the intervention. And then the other, let's call it the control group, did not do anything with their diet, just kept eating the exact same stuff. But they were all diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. These are ages between 11 and 16, and they're all boys. And so the data is pretty much connected to about 8 weeks of the intervention. And here's what they found out, is that when the group that followed the dietary intervention, basically what they eliminated was sweets, sugary sweets, sweetened beverages, sweetened with either sugar or high fructose corn syrup, and fruit juice. So this isn't even for, those of us who pay attention a lot to a lot of low carb studies out there. This isn't even low carb. They didn't focus on the entire carbohydrate realm. All they did is they just evaluated and intervened on just the sugar content. So that's all they did. And over an 8-week period, there's some really significant changes. The non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, they used a very sophisticated MRI evaluation to evaluate the amount of fat around the liver, and it decreased really significantly. And then they looked at some blood marker parameters. They looked at ALT, alanine aminotransferase, which is one of the key liver enzymes to evaluate liver function. And then they looked at cholesterol, and cholesterol is made in the liver, and following this intervention of basically a low sugar diet, the cholesterol dropped significantly in the intervention group. And none of these things happened in the non-intervention group. The half the subjects that just kept eating the way that they had always been eating, they did not have any of these changes. to their fatty liver or to their cholesterol or to their ALT liver function marker. So there's really significant change in this period of time that these kids experience and decrease their risk factor. Not only does fatty liver disease go down, but along with that, what drops down is their risk factor for future liver disease, for future diabetes. These kids were on the fast track to diabetes. These kids were on the fast track to cardiovascular disease. These kids were on the fast track to shortened lifespan by eating this way. And so hopefully the researchers encourage them to keep following this program even well beyond the parameters of the study to really help decrease their risk factors of these, really life-threatening future conditions. And this was all in kids. This is adolescents. This wasn't on 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds. So imagine a few more decades if they just continued following this diet, which so many adults are doing. And this is why these conditions are just on the rise so significantly. So I want to come back to a point that I just kind of glossed over, and I wonder if you caught it. I mentioned that all that was dropped in this was sugar, and their cholesterol dropped significantly. So I think we can make the connection between the liver and fatty liver disease and fat accumulation because of sugar, excess sugar, and sugar just kind of spills over, so the liver has to do something with it. But everybody thinks that elevated cholesterol is a dietary cholesterol problem. Although I mentioned many times, citing multiple studies on this show, and have mentioned it many, many times, there's still a very deeply ingrained belief that if you have high cholesterol, you have to get dietary cholesterol out of your diet. So people always go, oh man, I got to get eggs out. I can't eat meat anymore. I can't have any saturated fat. None of that is true. None of that is true. And that's been widely sort of debunked as a connection of your dietary cholesterol. On a fasting cholesterol test, it's fasting. So whatever was part of the diet, obviously eating cholesterol from cholesterol-rich foods will temporarily make your blood levels of cholesterol go up. That's why we do it fasting, because then what that pretty much leaves is just your own body's production of cholesterol in the liver. And so just by dropping sugar, which has always been what we suggest to drop cholesterol levels, it's sugar. And it's the refined, processed, grain-type carbohydrates that cause your cholesterol to go up because it makes the liver function abnormally, and so cholesterol production goes up. So I just wanted to kind of make that point that by just eliminating these different types of sweetened foods and sugar, their cholesterol was reduced significantly. And this is just in adolescence, and same thing will happen with adults. So if you haven't heard of this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you will, and chances are either you or somebody you know is suffering from this. And there's very, very simple solutions. Just start by decreasing your sugar. Same thing that they did in the study. So hopefully that helps. I hope you learned something, and I will keep reading the studies. Oh, by the way, the study was published in one of our top tier medical journals called the Journal of the American Medical Association. We call it the JAMA. And this was just a few days ago, so it's very recent information. And so I hope you learned something. I'll keep reading the studies and bringing you the information. Until then, keep it real.